So you one-shot everything, but you also get one-shotted. That is the trade-off with the budget bloodmage build. It has insane damage, but is also squishy. The good news is, with a bit more investment, we can make it way tankier while keeping that insane damage. This upgrade version is a well-balanced, smooth mapper and can handle nearly all content except Simulacrums, and I will explain why later. Overall, it feels amazing to play, and I'm really happy with this one, so if you want to push the build even further, you absolutely can, and let's get right into it. The goal of this version is to make the build tankier, and there are quite a few different ways to achieve being tankier on this build. You could go full ES, stacking, mix in a bit more life-based sustains, or even explore hybrid defense. But after testing different setups, I have found that focusing on high energy shields and evasions give the best balance of survivability and gameplay. To make it happen, we are taking advantage of the subterfuge notable, which turns our helmets into a major source of evasions. This is a game changer because it lets us scale both evasions and energy shields without having to make major sacrifice elsewhere. With some adjustment and investment into jewels, skill trees, we can push our evasions to well above 60%, sitting comfortably at around 2k HP and 5k energy shields, and if we are counting life remnant, overflow, and green feast, that is well above 4k HP and 10k ES, which is a large HP pool. Now, since this is an update to the original budget build, I'm going to assume that you're already familiar with the core mechanics instead of going over everything from scratch. I'll be focusing on what you need to know to upgrade and transitions into this tankier version, so if you have played the budget build and want to take it further, this guy is for you. At its core, the build remains largely the same. The fundamental requirements haven't changed. We are still aiming for 100% crit cap to ensure maximum consistencies. Yes, winter is an option if you are struggling to cap crits. I personally prefer to keep the gameplay loop as simple as possible. Bloodmage naturally has access to high crit scaling, so with the right setup you can reach crit cap without too much extra investment, and I highly recommend doing so. When it comes to the skill trees, we are making some key adjustments, shifting a lot of our passive nodes from the left side of the trees to the right side, with access to some strong evasion-based nodes. The exact pathing can vary depending on your jewel setups, but I will get into that later. We are also taking Eternal Youth in this version because we are using the Killjoy Glove. The glove prevents us from using Life Flask to sustains, and Eternal Youth allow us to convert that sustain into energy shields regens, which makes a huge difference in survivability. This is especially useful because in our build, our life should almost always be overflowing thanks to life remnants, meaning that we will rarely run out of health, and Eternal Youth essentially smooth out a lot of the sustain, making the build feel a lot more fluid and reliable. Now, pair that with the utility belt and an effervescent flask, you will have instant energy shields recovery, and it is a massive quality of life improvement over the budget version, and is one of the key upgrades that makes this build feel much tankier overall. The Megalomania jewels is one of the most impactful upgrades for this build. We are looking for any of these following notables as they are all pretty strong. If you are aiming for jewels with 2 of these notables, be prepared to spend a lot of currencies because even a single strong notable can make a big difference. Subterfuge Mask is one of the best options as it provides significant evasions from our helmets and it is a core part of the build. However, since we can avoid this on our amulets, I recommend doing so to save costs. High Alert is incredibly strong because we are almost always at full HP thanks to the Life Remnant Overflow. This notable grants 50% increased evasion rating, which synergizes perfectly well with bloodmage and will have 99% uptimes. Illuminated Crown increases our ES by 70% on the helmet. Since we are already using Subterfuge Mask, we want a high ES base helmet anyway, making this a pretty good choice. It's important to note that this increase applies after the Subterfuge Mask evasion convergence, so you don't get to double dip on the evasion bonus. Personally, I prioritize Illuminated Crown because it allows for more flexibility with the helmet choices, giving some room for future ES upgrades. If you cannot get both of the notable on the jewels, look for any other notables. that provide critical strike chance, evasions, or energy shields, and they will still be beneficial for the build. We also need to add a From Nothing jewel into our build, this time allocated the nodes around Oasis. This will let us text escape strategies and careful considerations, which together provide a whopping 70% increased evasion rating for just 2 passive points, one of the most efficient defensive investment in the build. For higher budget upgrades, consider adding an Oroth, Heroic Strategies, and allocate the Whisper of Dooms, which will grant you access to Black Site training, and it will convert every 2 intelligence into a 1% increased evasion rating. Since we naturally hover around 200 intelligence, this will provide another massive boost to our evasions. Now let's go over all the gear upgrades and the key stats to prioritize for each slot. The goal here is to optimize for energy shields and evasions and capping resistance for maximum tankiness. Easily the most important upgrades in the build, we want to pick a high energy shields helmet. Aim for at least 400 plus ES, but the higher the better. Since we are using Subterfuge Mask, the helmet ES directly translate into evasion, so investing in the slot is key. With some adjustment in the passive skill trees, we need additional crits from gear to maintain the 100% crit chance, and so you can look for that in the helmets. Try to get at least 25% crit chance. For the rest of the stats, try to get high elemental resistance, and if possible, go for chaos resistance as well. Optionally, you can get rarity on the slots and maximum life as well, but it's not really necessary since we are focusing on ES. For the body armor, we want a balance of energy shields, spirits, and resistance. You want at least 40 spirits to be able to run all the aura and my setups. The body armor is another major ES source in our build, so make sure you get a really high ES base here to significantly boost your ES number. Elemental resistance is a given, but having chaos resistance on your chest piece will also make gearing a lot easier, so make sure you grab that. The utility belt is an important item in the upgrades version of the build. As I mentioned before, it synergizes really well with Eternal Youth. On the belt, you want high maximum life, you want chaos resistance, elemental resistance. With all these gear upgrades, we are looking at capping resistance, including chaos resistance, at least 5,000 energy shields for more tankiness, and at least 60% evasions for extra mitigations. And that's pretty much it. These gear changes are what make the builds a lot more tankier and a lot better to play compared to the budget setups. Before diving into the skill change, a quick disclaimer, I want to keep things simple since the build is already extremely overpowered in terms of damage. This means that no complex offering setups or weapon swaps, but if you want to experiment with those, you absolutely can. This version keeps things efficient, consistent, and easier to play while still delivering the insane damage. For the main damage spell, you can use any spell that fits your playstyle, but I will be showcasing the Spark version since a lot of people have been asking for it. We are using level 1 Spark to keep the mana cost low, and we are using Arcane Tempo, Persistence, and Accelerations. These 3 support gems give solid quality of life improvement, making Spark feel a lot smoother to play. Fork and Blind is there to provide better coverage and also screen-wide blind debuff, which is really good for us since we are already an evasion-based build. Instead of running Elemental Conflux, which is only really useful for pinnacle bosses, we are now going to be using Blasphemy and Temporal Chain, and this provides a massive slow effect for all enemies around us. It is a consistent defensive layer across all content in the game, and I have tested this across multiple characters, and is definitely one of the best defensive tools available. We are going to use Heightened Curse and Encumbrance to further increase the slow effect, Ritualistic Curse to expand the area of effect, allowing it to apply to more enemies. Now, while we already have solid energy shield sustains, we add Ghost Dance for extra recovery just in case the energy shield dips too low. You want to run a lower level of Ghost Dance so you don't have to spend as many points in dexterity, and supported with Fast Forward, Herbalisms, and Cannibalisms. Blink is now bind to weapon 2 only, and you have to turn off some other aura here. And then you can just use Raise Shields, bind it to a key whenever you swap to a shields, and then you can automatically blink. Elemental Conflux is still in the build, but it's only really there for the high-end pinnacle boss fight. You can use it exclusively for pinnacle bosses, and if you feel like you don't need it because you have enough damage, you can drop it entirely. This setup keeps the build powerful, easy to play without any unnecessary complexity. You can absolutely tweak things further if you want to push the build even more, but this version is already optimized for strong defense and comfortable gameplay. I made a slight change to the Ascendancy setups, swapping Vitality Siphon for Grasping Wounds. The main reason here is that we don't really rely on Leech anymore, so Grasping Wound would make us a lot tankier when dealing with big hits. This means you will survive better in tougher encounters, making it a much more valuable defensive layer for this build. A good alternative for the Grasping Wound is Blood Barbs. This node provides the physical damage as extra damage, so it will scale well with our build, and so if you feel like you're lacking DPS, Blood Barb is a solid alternative. Alright, so even though this build has insane damage, it is not the best choice for Simulacrum farming, and here's why. In Simulacrum, raw damage isn't everything, and it doesn't matter if you can one-shot pinnacle bosses. What matters is how fast and how consistently you can apply the damage to the enemies with HP ranging from like 1000 to like 100,000. For example, hitting a single monster with 34 million damage means nothing if the mobs already jump on you and done the damage. So what really needed in Simulacrum is to continuously pumping out the damage with really high coverage, so you can clear enemies before they even get a chance to attack you. Unfortunately, this build has a cooldown on the frostwall abilities, which is a huge limitation. Without items like Temporalis, where you can actually reduce the cooldown to just around 100 ms, the build isn't fast or efficient enough for Simulacrum farming. If you still want to try to farm Simulacrums, in my attempt to try it, there are some adjustments that I made that you can maybe try and see if you can success, but again, I would not recommend this against farming Simulacrums. First, you want to use a Stone Charm because this prevents stuns, which is crucial in Simulacrums. And second, you want to swap Ingenuity into the Greater Lightning Bolt to replace Elemental Focus. This helps reduce the cooldown of your abilities, and Greater Lightning Bolts will be there to basically kill a lot of these small enemies. Your playstyle is going to be very defensively. You want to avoid getting chain stun, avoid getting jump on surrounded by monsters, so you have to kite very specifically. And you also want to cap your chaos resistance because chaos damage is extremely deadly in Simulacrums. So having high chaos res, if not cap, is mandatory. No amount of defensive investment will matter if your damage output isn't fast enough to keep up with the waves of enemies. So at the end of the day, this build isn't really optimal for Simulacrum, unless you can get your hand on a Temporalis, which again will solve a lot of the issues with the build, and that is the reality of it. And finally, I want to cover some of the most asked questions in my videos, and the first one is, do you need 100% crit chance? The short answer is no, especially if you're just mapping. You don't need to stress over hitting exactly 100% crits. However, having 100% crit chance will give you the most consistent damage outputs and also remove the needs to use Eye of Winter, which means you have one less button to press. If you feel like your crits are inconsistent, you should either increase your crit chance or use Eye of Winter as a backup solution. If you're wondering what stats to pick as you progress through the campaign, I personally go for the increased charm charge, 25% reduced stuns thresholds, and 10% chaos resistance. It's all there in the written guides and in the POB link I provide in the descriptions. If you have a decent amount of crits and your crit is not killing anything, then you might want to double check your cast on crit setup to make sure that the frostwall is there and it's lower level, and then you want to make sure it's active, and then you also want to make sure that you have high enough int requirements for the Great Lightning Bolt, and just overall check all the stats requirements. Sometimes missing intelligence or strength can stop some skills from functioning properly. Yes, you can play this on as an Ascendancy season class, but it won't probably be as good as a bloodmage. You are playing a different class, you'll need Eye of Winter to help with the crit consistency, since you'll lose the bloodmage Ascendancy crit benefits. This build can be played on any class that start near the witch and monk area, as they have access to similar tree pathing and can still reach all the keynotes. Okay, so the reason why we keep the frostwall at level 9 is that our damage comes from the Grit and Lightning Bolt strike, overkilling the frostwall. A lower level frostwall has less HP, meaning there will be more overkill damage get converted into additional damage, which make the build function as intended. So all my written guides are actively updated by me because I'm still playing and optimizing the build myself. If you ever notice any discrepancy between the videos and the written guide, assume the written guide is the most up-to-date versions. Check it regularly for any changes or improvement, or ask in Discord. And that's about it for this update. I hope this video helped you out, give you some idea, understanding the new way to get tankier with our bloodmage build. If you have any questions, drop a comment down below and I'll try to answer as many as I can. Thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!